Hey YouTube, it's me back with another video of UFC predictions. This time it's for the UFC Fight Night this Saturday, January 30th. Anthony Johnson versus Ryan Bader. And let's get to it. The first fight is Tony Martin versus Felipe Olivieri. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it or not, but I don't really know anything about Felipe, but I guess I'll just go with Tony Martin. You know, he hasn't had all that impressive of a career in the UFC, but I think he gets it done on Saturday against the newcomer. Next is Damon Jackson versus Levon Makashvili. I think Levon Makashvili gets it done. I guess it'll just be maybe a little bit faster. That's my guess. You know, he beat Mark Adiva. He's supposed to fight Nick Lentz, but Nick Lentz had to pull out from I think from the flu. But yeah, so I got Levon Makashvili for that one. Third fight, the main event on Fight Pass, is Matt Dwyer versus Randy Brown. I've heard a lot of good things about Randy Brown. This time I'm going with the newcomer Randy Brown. I've heard a lot of good things about him. Heard he's a good fighter. So why not go with him? You know, I know Matt Dwyer's 6'4" or whatever, but he I don't think he'll beat the newcomer and Randy Brown. I think Randy Brown's gonna take it. FS1 prelims, they start with Alex Caceres versus Macio Fullen. I'm going with Alex Caceres. I think he's just been in a war, like he's been in several wars in the bantamweight division, you know, pushing Uriah Faber to the limit, then getting knocked out right away by Francisco Rivera. That's not really a war, but he's been in a fight with Masanori Kanehara, and yeah, so I think Alex Caceres, I think he has more experience, and he's had some experience at 145, so I think he does get it done against Macio Fullen. And he even beat Sergio Pettis on rear naked choke. Next is George Sullivan versus Alexander Yakovlev. I think George Sullivan gets it done. You know, I think he's been a pretty good fighter in the UFC. That one loss has been to Tim Means, but I think he gets it done again on Saturday against Alexander Yakovlev. Next is Dustin Ortiz versus Wilson Race. I gotta go with Dustin Ortiz. You know, I think he's been for a while pushing to be in that #1 spot, and I think getting closer. I don't think he'll ever be #1 exactly, but I think getting closer to the top, and I think he's gonna. I mean, he would get closer to the top with a win over Wilson Race on Saturday. So I think Dustin's gonna get this one. Next is Rafael Natal versus Kevin Casey. I actually think Kevin Casey gets it done. You know, he's been. Unfortunately, something happened in his last fight with Antonio Carlos Jr. I think it might have been like an eye poke, but yeah. So I think you know, he had an outstanding performance against Bubba Bush. I think that might have turned into a no contest as well. And then he beat Ildemar Alcantara in a unanimous decision. Next is Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus Diego Ferreira. I gotta go with Olivier Aubin-Mercier. He's been dominant in his last few fights, like with David Mitchell and Tony Sims. And who else did he fight? Jake Lindsay, that's who it was. So in his last few fights, he's been dominant. He's looked outstanding, and I think he does it again against Diego Ferreira. Next is the main event of the prelims is Tarek Saffiedine versus Jake Ellenberger. I gotta go with Tarek Saffiedine. I think he just has, I don't know, I think he's been maybe faced the better competition. You know, that may not be true. I mean, Jake Ellenberger's faced some good competition like McDonald and Lawler, but Tarek Saffiedine was champion in Strikeforce, and Jake Ellenberger was never a champion, but you know, Saffiedine's been in there with McDonald. He destroyed Nate Marquardt. He destroyed Hoingoi Lim. So I think Tarek Saffiedine gets it done with the leg kicks again. I think Tarek's going to be back. Then the main card starts off with Sage Northcutt versus Brian Barberena. Might be surprising, but I got to go with Brian Barberena this time. I think that Brian had, he was getting outclassed in the first round with Chad Laprise, but then Chad started to fade in the last 2 rounds of their fight. So I was actually at that fight in Montreal. We got tickets to go to that. And me and my dad were surprised that Brian Barberena didn't win. I mean, we thought he came back and won those last 2 rounds, But I still don't think Chad Laprise won that fight. And Cody Pfister even was on top of Sage. He was working on Sage and landed some ground and pound. So I got to go with Brian Barberena. And next is Uri Alcantara versus Jimmy Rivera. I got to go with Jimmy Rivera. He's been a rising star in the UFC and a couple of wins on his belt. And yeah, I think that Jimmy will just get it done. I think he'll break into that top 15 of the bantamweight division. I think this is Jimmy's time. Co-main event, Josh Barnett versus Ben Rothwell. I think Ben Rothwell gets it done. He's been on a run in the heavyweight division and, choking out Matt Mitrione, who more people thought Matt Mitrione would have won. I thought Ben Rothwell would have won, but and he did win. So I think that Ben Rothwell can pull something off here against Josh Barnett. Then the main event is Anthony Johnson versus Ryan Bader, of course. I have to go with Ryan Bader. I think Ryan Bader's just going to outwork Anthony Johnson. I think he's going to be in the better shape. I don't know if he'll be in any better shape, but it's just that Anthony Johnson tries to land all those big, heavy shots and knock people out, and sometimes it backfires on him, and then he starts to gas and fade in like the later rounds. But I just have to go with Ryan Bader. And I actually met Anthony Johnson when we were at the Fan Expo, so but I just think Ryan Bader will be the better fighter in the later rounds if it goes that long. So, yep, these are my predictions for UFC Fight Night on Saturday, January 30th, 2016. Anthony Johnson and Ryan Bader. See you guys next time. Bye.